Welcome, dear audience, to a journey through one of the most remarkable stories in European history, the unification of Italy. Today we will step into a world of ambition, courage, betrayal, and resilience. For centuries, the Italian peninsula was divided into kingdoms, duchies, and foreign-controlled territories. Yet within this fractured land, there burned a dream, the dream of one Italy, united under a single flag, with one voice and one destiny. In this documentary, you will walk alongside visionaries like Giuseppe Mazzini, who gave birth to the idea of unification, Giuseppe Garibaldi, the fearless general who fought with fire in his heart, and Count Camillo di Cavour, the master strategist whose diplomacy reshaped Europe. You will witness the struggles of ordinary Italians, who longed for freedom from foreign rule, and the sacrifices of those who dared to defy empires for the hope of unity. This is not just the story of wars and politics, but of a dream carried by generations. The story of how scattered states, ruled by kings and emperors, became a single nation. Welcome to the unification of Italy, a story of vision, blood, and destiny. Imagine living in a land of ancient beauty, where every city holds history, but your homeland is not your own. Imagine hearing foreign soldiers marching through your streets, rulers who do not speak your language, and taxes taken to serve distant kings. Now imagine the spark of rebellion, whispers of freedom carried in secret meetings, songs of revolution echoing through the countryside, and a red-shirted army marching to claim your future. This is the heartbeat of the Italian unification, a struggle where men and women risked everything for a dream of one nation. Subscribe for more history, like and comment if you believe history should never be forgotten, and share to spark conversation about the lessons we must learn from the past. This is not myth, this is history, and it begins here. In the early decades of the 19th century, the Italian peninsula was a land of contradictions. It was a land of breathtaking beauty, with sunlit coasts, fertile valleys, and cities rich in ancient glory. Yet beneath this cultural splendor lay deep division and oppression. Italy was not a single nation but a patchwork of states, duchies, and kingdoms, each ruled by different powers, many of them foreign. The north was dominated by Austria, which held Lombardy and Venetia in a tight grip. The Papal States cut across the center, governed directly by the Pope and protected by foreign armies. To the south lay the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, under the Bourbon dynasty, ruling over Naples and Sicily, with iron authority. For the ordinary Italian, life was hard. Heavy taxes crushed the poor, while censorship silenced voices of dissent. Farmers in Lombardy struggled under Austrian landlords, while fishermen in Sicily lived in poverty, despite the richness of the sea. Across the peninsula, a sense of frustration grew. Italians shared a common language, culture, and history, but they lacked the most vital thing: unity. Foreign soldiers patrolled the streets of Milan, reminding citizens that their fate was dictated from Vienna, not their own homeland. The tricolor flag, symbol of liberty, was outlawed, its display punishable by imprisonment. Yet whispers of change stirred. In taverns and academies, in the songs of peasants and the speeches of young intellectuals, there lived a dream: one Italy, free and united. The contrast was striking. Rome, the heart of Catholicism, where pilgrims from around the world gathered, stood in the middle of a land that had once been the center of an empire. How could the descendants of Caesar and Dante remain divided and ruled by foreigners? The answer lay in the growing spirit of nationalism, sweeping across Europe, a wave that Italians would soon embrace. This chapter sets the stage for what was to come, a struggle not only of armies and politics, but of identity. Italy, before unification, was like a mosaic shattered into countless fragments. Only visionaries, warriors, and statesmen could hope to piece it together. And it was in this world of division that the seeds of revolution were planted. The dream of a unified Italy had not yet taken shape, but the soil was fertile with discontent. Soon names like Mazzini, Garibaldi, Cavour, and Victor Emmanuel II would rise to embody that dream. But for now, Italy was a land in waiting, restless, divided, yet destined for greatness. Out of the discontent and frustration of a divided Italy, one man emerged as a prophet of unity, Giuseppe Mazzini. Born in Genoa in 1805, Mazzini was not a soldier or a king, but a thinker, writer, and revolutionary. From his youth, he believed Italy could not remain a land broken into fragments, controlled by foreign rulers and self-serving monarchs. He envisioned something radical, an Italy united not by conquest, but by the will of its people, built on liberty, equality, and brotherhood. Mazzini's vision was both political and spiritual. He believed unification was not only about borders and governments, but about awakening the soul of a people. To him, Italy was not just geography, it was destiny. He called on Italians to rise above regional loyalties and foreign chains, to see themselves as one nation. In 1831, in exile in France, he founded the movement Giovine Italia, Young Italy. It was more than a political society, it was a secret brotherhood that spread like fire through universities, taverns, and meeting halls. Its symbol was the tricolor flag, banned in many parts of Italy, but carried in secret by the young dreamers who pledged their lives to the cause. Mazzini's words inspired thousands. Through smuggled pamphlets, coded letters, and fiery speeches, he gave shape to the dream that Italy could be free and united. His motto, God and the people, echoed a belief that the people themselves, not kings or emperors, were the true guardians of Italy's future. But his dream came at a price. The Austrian police hunted his followers. Many young men who swore loyalty to Young Italy were arrested, tortured, or executed. Yet with every death, the idea spread further. Failure and exile only made Mazzini more determined. He became a man living in the shadows, always pursued, yet never silenced. In smoky rooms by candlelight, students gathered to hear his message. Farmers whispered his name in villages, while poets and painters echoed his ideals in their work. For every city that rejected him, another opened its doors. Mazzini's vision ignited the spark of nationalism across the peninsula. Though he was not a soldier, Mazzini laid the foundation for the battles to come. His dream would inspire men like Garibaldi to fight, and leaders like Cavour to plan. Without Mazzini, the idea of Italy might never have existed. He was the soul of the Risorgimento, the man who dared to imagine one Italy where there had only been fragments. The year 1848 was a storm that swept across Europe, from Paris to Vienna, from Berlin to Budapest. Revolution shook the old order. Italy was no exception. In Milan, Venice, and Rome, ordinary citizens rose against kings and emperors demanding liberty and national unity. For a moment it seemed as if Mazzini's dream might come true. In Milan, the 5 days of Milan saw citizens barricade the streets. With muskets, stones, and whatever weapons they could find, they drove Austrian troops from the city. Women carried ammunition, priests blessed the rebels, and children hurled rocks at enemy soldiers. The tricolor flag flew proudly over the rooftops for the first time in years. In Venice, revolutionaries declared the Republic of San Marco, inspired by their city's glorious past. Meanwhile, in Rome, Pope Pius the Mons was forced to flee as revolutionaries declared a Roman Republic, governed by progressive leaders like Giuseppe Mazzini himself, who briefly returned from exile to guide its vision. But hope was short-lived. Austria, France, and Spain intervened to crush the movements. In Milan, Austrian troops returned with overwhelming force. In Rome, French soldiers restored the Pope. Venice fell after months of heroic resistance and bombardment. The dream of 1848 ended in smoke, blood, and defeat. Yet, though crushed, these revolutions planted seeds that could not be destroyed. Italians had tasted unity, even if briefly. They had seen that foreign armies could be driven out, that freedom was possible, and they had shown Europe that Italy's people were no longer silent. The revolutions of 1848 were not the birth of Italy, but they were the first heartbeat of its future. They taught Italians that courage alone was not enough. They needed strategy, allies, and leaders who could match vision with power. Out of the failures of 1848, a new kind of leader emerged, one who believed Italy could not be unified by passion alone, but by cunning and calculation. Count Camillo di Cavour, Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, was no romantic revolutionary like Mazzini or Garibaldi. He was a man of strategy, diplomacy, and cold pragmatism. Born into nobility, Cavour was a modernizer. He expanded railroads, built industries, and reformed agriculture in Piedmont. He believed that a strong, prosperous Piedmont could lead the way to Italian unification. But he also knew that Austria, France, and other powers would never allow Italy to unify without careful maneuvering. Cavour mastered the game of European politics. He aligned Piedmont with France and Britain in the Crimean War, sending troops to fight in distant lands not for glory, but to earn a place at the negotiating table. His gamble worked. For the first time, the Italian question was raised in European diplomacy. Behind his round glasses and quiet demeanor, Cavour was relentless. He negotiated, plotted, and schemed with a single goal: to drive Austria out of northern Italy. He cared little for republican dreams. His vision was a united Italy under the Savoy monarchy, with King Victor Emmanuel II at its head. While Mazzini inspired hearts, Cavour moved kings and emperors. He was the architect, the chess player of unification. Without him, the dream might have remained forever in exile. If Cavour was the mind of unification, Giuseppe Garibaldi was its beating heart. A soldier of fortune, a revolutionary, and a man adored by the people, Garibaldi was the warrior who gave flesh to Mazzini's dream. With his trademark red shirt, rugged beard, and fiery spirit, he became a legend in his own lifetime. Garibaldi had fought in South America, learning the art of guerrilla warfare. When he returned to Italy, he carried with him not only experience but also a deep belief in freedom and justice. His charisma drew men to his cause. Farmers, students, and dreamers alike donned the red shirt and followed him with absolute devotion. In 1860, Garibaldi launched his most daring campaign, the Expedition of the Thousand. With just over 1,000 volunteers, he set sail to liberate Sicily from Bourbon rule. Armed with little more than courage and a few muskets, his men landed at Marsala. Against all odds, they won victory after victory, rallying peasants to their side. The red shirts became a symbol of Italian courage. In every village they entered, Garibaldi was greeted as a hero. His passion for liberty was contagious. His leadership inspired devotion. Within months, Sicily fell, and Garibaldi marched triumphantly into Naples, greeted by cheering crowds. Garibaldi's campaign electrified Italy. He was more than a general. He was a living myth, the people's champion. Where Cavour relied on diplomacy, Garibaldi relied on fire and faith. And yet, the two men, so different in style, were destined to meet in the struggle for Italy's future. By the mid-19th century, the small kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont emerged as the strongest beacon of Italian hope. While other Italian states remained stagnant or under foreign control, Sardinia pushed forward with modernization, reforms, and a growing sense of national responsibility. At its head stood King Victor Emmanuel II, a monarch with the heart of a soldier. He was not a scholar like Mazzini, nor a strategist like Cavour, but he had something that mattered deeply to Italians: determination. His tall frame, mustache, and military bearing made him a figure of authority, while his willingness to stand beside his troops earned him respect. Under his rule, Piedmont expanded railroads, built factories, and reformed laws to limit aristocratic privilege. The state became a magnet for liberals and nationalists who sought refuge after failed uprisings elsewhere. Turin, the capital, buzzed with ideas and debates. Newspapers flourished, and for the first time, the Italian cause had a true home base. Cavour's careful diplomacy positioned Piedmont as the spearhead of unification. He strengthened the army, modernized the economy, and nurtured alliances. Together with Victor Emmanuel, they crafted a partnership. The king embodied national pride, while Cavour maneuvered behind the scenes. To many Italians, Sardinia-Piedmont represented more than a kingdom. It symbolized possibility. From its mountains and valleys would rise the force capable of uniting all of Italy. In 1853, far from Italy, a conflict erupted in the distant Crimean Peninsula. On the surface, it was a war between Russia and an alliance of Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire. For Italy, it seemed irrelevant. But for Cavour, the Crimean War was an opportunity. Piedmont's resources were limited, yet Cavour convinced Victor Emmanuel II to send an expeditionary force to support France and Britain. Over 15,000 Piedmontese soldiers marched into a foreign land, enduring harsh winters, disease, and bloody battles, like the Battle of the Chernaya. Many never returned home. Why sacrifice Piedmontese lives in a distant war? Because Cavour understood politics. By joining the war, Piedmont earned a seat at the Congress of Paris in 1856, where the great powers redrew Europe's balance after the conflict. For the first time, Cavour brought up the Italian question on the international stage. European diplomats were forced to consider Italy, not as scattered states but as a problem, and perhaps a cause that demanded attention. This was a masterstroke of diplomacy. Italy was now part of Europe's great chessboard. Though costly, Piedmont's sacrifice was a step toward legitimacy. It showed Italians that their leaders were willing to fight for recognition, even in distant lands. Cavour's diplomatic maneuvers bore fruit when he secured a secret alliance with Napoleon III of France. If Austria attacked Piedmont, France would come to its aid. This pact set the stage for the Second War of Italian Independence in 1859. Austria, suspicious of Piedmont's military buildup, issued an ultimatum: disarm or face war. Victor Emmanuel II refused. Austrian troops marched into Piedmontese territory, and the war began. The French army, alongside Piedmontese forces, clashed with Austria in a series of bloody battles. At Magenta and Solferino, rivers of blood stained the fields. Solferino was especially horrific. Tens of thousands of men lay dead or wounded. It was this battle that inspired Henri Dunant to create the Red Cross. For Italians, the war was both tragic and triumphant. Lombardy was liberated from Austrian control, and Milan welcomed Victor Emmanuel II with jubilation. But the war also revealed the brutal cost of unification. For every victory, thousands of lives were lost. The war showed Italy that independence would not be handed to them, it would be paid for with blood. Yet for the first time, a piece of the dream became reality. The War of 1859 was only partly victorious. While Lombardy was gained, Venetia remained under Austrian control. Napoleon III, fearing a full-scale European conflict, abruptly signed peace with Austria at Villafranca, without consulting Cavour. The decision enraged him, but it forced Italy to adjust its course. To secure French support, Cavour and Victor Emmanuel II agreed to cede Savoy and Nice, ancient lands of the House of Savoy, to France. It was a painful sacrifice. For many Italians, giving away Italian soil, in the name of unity, felt like betrayal. None took it harder than Giuseppe Garibaldi, who was born in Nice. He felt robbed of his homeland, and his relationship with Cavour soured. Yet the deal had benefits. Central Italian states, like Tuscany, Parma, and Modena, voted to join Piedmont. Piece by piece, Italy was coming together. The cost was high, but the map was changing. This chapter revealed the complexity of unification. Not every gain came from the battlefield. Sometimes, unity demanded compromise, sacrifice, and even betrayal. In 1860, Italy's most daring adventure began, Garibaldi's Expedition of the Thousand. With just over 1,000 volunteers, students, peasants, exiles, Garibaldi set sail from Genoa. Their mission: liberate Sicily from Bourbon rule and ignite revolution in southern Italy. Dressed in red shirts, armed with old rifles and boundless courage, they landed at Marsala. The Bourbon army was far stronger, but Garibaldi's charisma and strategy turned the tide. At the Battle of Calatafimi, he rallied his men with the cry, "Qui sia fe, l'Italia, o si muore." Here we make Italy, or we die. His victories inspired Sicilian peasants, who joined by the thousands. Together they marched through the island, liberating Palermo after fierce street fighting. By summer, Sicily was free, and Garibaldi crossed into Naples, cheered as a hero. The world watched in astonishment. With a tiny army and the will of the people, Garibaldi had toppled a kingdom. His success shook Europe and forced Cavour to act quickly to prevent a clash between Garibaldi's republicans and the monarchy. The Expedition of the Thousand was a turning point. It proved that Italy's unification was unstoppable. After securing Sicily, Garibaldi turned his eyes to the mainland. His small force of volunteers, now strengthened by thousands of Sicilian peasants, crossed the Strait of Messina under cover of night. The Bourbon kingdom of the two Sicilies, once thought unshakable, trembled before the advance of the red shirts. The march south was a spectacle of both military daring and popular enthusiasm. In every village, peasants left their plows and fishermen abandoned their nets to join the cause. The tricolor flag spread like wildfire. Garibaldi, tall and rugged, rode at the front on horseback, his red shirt shining like a beacon. At Reggio Calabria, his men defeated Bourbon troops with ease, proving that discipline and numbers could not withstand passion and purpose. Garibaldi's strategy was simple: inspire, advance, and liberate. Town after town fell with little resistance. The Bourbon army, riddled with corruption and poor morale, melted away. By September 1860, Garibaldi entered Naples in triumph. Crowds filled the streets, showering him with flowers. The people hailed him not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Naples, the jewel of the South, was now in the hands of a revolutionary hero. Yet beneath the celebrations lay tension. Garibaldi envisioned a republican Italy. Cavour and Victor Emmanuel II wanted a monarchy. The question loomed: who would control the future of the nation? By autumn 1860, Garibaldi controlled nearly all of southern Italy. Yet his dream of a republican Italy clashed with the monarchist vision of Cavour and Victor Emmanuel II. To prevent civil war among Italians, the two forces had to meet. On October 26, 1860, near the small town of Teano, Garibaldi and Victor Emmanuel II came face to face. The scene was simple, yet historic. Garibaldi, in his red shirt and boots dusty from campaign, dismounted his horse and saluted the king. "Hail to the King of Italy," he declared, surrendering authority of his conquests. Victor Emmanuel, in full military uniform, accepted with dignity. For Garibaldi, it was a personal sacrifice. He handed over southern Italy, the fruits of his victories, to ensure unity. He could have kept power, but he chose the nation over himself. The handshake at Teano symbolized the merging of revolutionary zeal with monarchical legitimacy. Italy was not yet complete, but its shape was visible. For the people who watched, it was the dawn of a new era. In March 1861, the dream became reality. The Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed, with Victor Emmanuel II crowned as its first king. Turin, the capital of Piedmont, now became the capital of a united Italy. It was a moment of celebration, yet also of caution. Italy was united in name, but not in full. Venice remained under Austrian control, and Rome was still held by the Pope, protected by French troops. Still, for the first time in centuries, Italians could claim one flag, one king, one country. The proclamation was celebrated with parades, ringing church bells, and fireworks. Streets filled with citizens waving the tricolor. Veterans of the wars stood proudly in uniforms worn and patched. Students and intellectuals spoke of a bright future, yet unity was fragile. Regional rivalries persisted. The North was more industrialized and wealthy, while the South remained poor and suspicious of Piedmontese control. Cavour, the architect of much of this triumph, would not live to see it flourish. He died suddenly in June 1861, leaving behind an unfinished project. But despite its flaws, the proclamation of the kingdom marked a turning point in history. The dream of Mazzini, the sword of Garibaldi, the diplomacy of Cavour, and the authority of Victor Emmanuel had merged into a new nation. Only months after Italy's proclamation, tragedy struck. On June 6, 1861, Count Camillo di Cavour, died at the age of 50. His sudden passing shocked the nation. Italy, newly born, lost its greatest architect. Cavour's death left a void. His genius for diplomacy, his ability to maneuver among Europe's great powers, and his vision for Italy's modernization had been unmatched. Without him, Italy risked instability. In Turin, thousands lined the streets for his funeral. Mourners carried black banners alongside the tricolor flag. Intellectuals and peasants alike wept, for they knew Italy had lost more than a statesman. It had lost its strategist, its guide. Cavour's last words reportedly were, "Italy is made, all is safe." But even as he uttered them, Italy was far from complete. Rome and Venetia remained outside the kingdom, and unity was fragile. His death was a reminder that the struggle was not over. Yet Cavour's legacy endured. His reforms in Piedmont, his skill in international politics, and his determination to see Italy united had set the path. Others would carry the torch, but his name would forever be remembered as the brain of unification. Though the Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed in 1861, Venetia remained under Austrian rule. For Italians, this was unfinished business. Venice, with its canals and glorious history, could not remain in foreign hands. The opportunity came in 1866, when Prussia declared war on Austria. Italy allied with Prussia, hoping that Austrian defeat would bring Venetia into Italian hands. This became known as the Third War of Italian Independence. The war was brutal and often disastrous for Italy. At the Battle of Custoza, the Italian army was defeated by Austria. At sea, the Italian navy suffered a crushing loss at the Battle of Lissa. Yet despite these defeats, Prussia's victories in Germany forced Austria to cede Venetia. In October 1866, Venetia was formally annexed to Italy. The people of Venice voted overwhelmingly in favor of joining the kingdom. Bells rang across the canals, and gondoliers waved tricolor flags. Though victory came not from Italian military triumph, but from diplomatic gain, Venetia was at last part of the nation. The Lion of St. Mark, symbol of Venice, now stood beneath the tricolor. Italy was closer than ever to being whole. Though much of Italy was now united, Rome remained outside the kingdom. The city, seat of the papacy, was protected by French troops who guaranteed the Pope's independence. For patriots like Garibaldi and Mazzini, Rome was not only the eternal city, but the heart of the Italian nation, the true capital. Yet the question was delicate. To attack Rome directly meant war with France, a dangerous prospect. Cavour, before his death, had warned against such reckless action, preferring diplomacy and patience. Victor Emmanuel II tried to balance respect for the papacy with the growing demand of his people to complete unification. Still, Garibaldi would not wait. In 1862, he gathered volunteers and marched toward Rome. But at Aspromonte, Italian troops, loyal to the king, intercepted him. In a tragic twist, Italians fought Italians. Garibaldi was wounded and captured, his dream temporarily crushed. The Roman question remained unresolved. For the next years, tensions simmered. Patriots whispered that Italy was incomplete until Rome was free. To the people, the unification would remain unfinished as long as the Pope ruled independently, under foreign. The final opportunity to seize Rome came not from Italian action, but from events in Europe. In 1870, war broke out between France and Prussia, the Franco-Prussian War. France, long the protector of the papacy, was now consumed with survival against German forces. Napoleon III withdrew his troops from Rome to defend France. Suddenly, the Papal States stood vulnerable. Italian patriots saw their chance. Without French protection, the Pope could not resist a determined Italian advance. Victor Emmanuel II acted swiftly. He declared that Italy would march on Rome, not to destroy the papacy, but to integrate it into the new nation. The Pope, Pius XI, refused compromise, declaring he would never submit to a secular king. In September 1870, Italian troops entered the Papal States. Skirmishes broke out at the Porta Pia in Rome, where Italian artillery breached the city walls. The papal defenders, though brave, were no match for the Italian army. On September 20th, Rome fell. For Italians it was the moment they had awaited for centuries. The tricolor now flew above the eternal city. Bells rang across the land. Italy was at last whole. With the capture of Rome in September 1870, the final chapter of unification was nearly complete. For centuries, Rome had symbolized glory, empire, and faith. Now it became the capital of a modern nation. On July 2nd, 1871, King Victor Emmanuel II entered Rome in triumph. The Italian Parliament declared the Eternal City the capital of the Kingdom of Italy. The Quirinal Palace, once home to popes, became the royal residence. The streets were filled with jubilation. Citizens from north and south, peasants and nobles, students and veterans, all came to witness history. They waved the tricolor and sang patriotic songs. For the first time, Italians could say their capital was Rome, yet unity brought new tensions. Pope Pius I declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican, refusing to recognize the authority of the Italian state. For decades, this Roman question would strain relations between church and state. But for the people, Rome as capital was the final proof of their nationhood. From the ruins of ancient empire and centuries of division, Italy had risen. A land once fragmented into kingdoms and duchies now stood as one. The dream of Mazzini, the courage of Garibaldi, the cunning of Cavour, and the authority of Victor Emmanuel had borne fruit. With Rome secured in 1870, Italy was finally united on the map, but forging unity on paper was far easier than creating it in the hearts of the people. The new nation faced daunting challenges. The north was industrial, modernizing rapidly, with railroads, factories, and commerce. The south, by contrast, remained rural, impoverished, and distrustful of the new government. Many southern peasants felt that unification had brought them more taxes but no prosperity. This divide gave rise to banditry and unrest, known as the Southern Question. Politically, Italy struggled with limited suffrage. Only a small portion of men could vote, leaving the majority of the population without a voice. Corruption was widespread, and governments rose and fell frequently. Economically, the cost of wars and unification weighed heavily. The new state had inherited debts from all the former kingdoms. Building a common army, legal system, and currency was a colossal task. Culturally, too, unity was fragile. Many Italians still identified more with their local region than with the new nation. Dialects and traditions divided the peninsula. In Sicily, Venetia, Tuscany, and Lombardy, people still saw themselves as Sicilians, Venetians, or Tuscans first, Italians second. Yet there was also hope. Schools taught a common language, railways and newspapers linked distant regions. The tricolor flag became a symbol of shared destiny. Italy's youth dreamed of a modern future, where the sacrifices of Mazzini, Cavour, Garibaldi, and Victor Emmanuel would not be in vain. Unification was not an end but a beginning. Italy was a young nation, and its journey had just begun. By 1871, the map of Italy was nearly complete. Rome was capital, Venice was free, and the tricolor flew from the Alps to Sicily. After centuries of foreign rule and division, the dream of a united Italy had been realized. It was not perfect, far from it. The Pope remained hostile, the South was restless, and poverty lingered. Yet for the first time, Italians had a nation to call their own. A people once divided into duchies, kingdoms, and city-states could now share in the pride of one flag, one king, and one identity. In 1878, Victor Emmanuel II, the first king of Italy, died. His funeral was attended by crowds who remembered the long road to unity. They mourned not only a king, but the living symbol of the Risorgimento. His legacy lived on through his son, Umberto Or, and the generations that followed. The story of unification was one of ideals and sacrifice. Mazzini's vision inspired millions. Garibaldi's sword won victories against impossible odds. Cavour's diplomacy outmaneuvered empires, and Victor Emmanuel's crown gave legitimacy to the dream. Italy had risen from fragmentation to nationhood. Its people had endured war, betrayal, poverty, and sacrifice, but they had triumphed. The tricolor flag, once banned and punished, now waved proudly over the eternal city. As the sun set on the 19th century, Italy stood ready to write new chapters of its history. The Risorgimento was not only the story of the past, but a promise for the future, that a people united by courage and hope could overcome any obstacle. The dream of Italy, long a whisper, had finally become a voice that would echo through time. Giuseppe Garibaldi, the hero of two worlds, remained a towering figure in Italian memory long after the unification. By the 1870s, he had grown older and frailer, yet his presence still inspired awe. His life had been a tapestry of daring campaigns, from South America to Sicily, from Rome to Naples. After unification, Garibaldi continued to fight for causes beyond Italy. He supported movements for liberty in France and elsewhere, embodying the spirit of a man who saw freedom as a universal right, not confined to national borders. Though his body weakened, his voice carried the same fire of conviction. In his later years, Garibaldi retired to his island home of Caprera, where visitors came from across the world to meet the legendary general. He lived simply, surrounded by the sea, writing memoirs and reflecting on his life. The people saw him as the sword of the Risorgimento, the warrior whose courage had turned dreams into victories. When Garibaldi died in 1882, Italy mourned deeply. His funeral was not only a farewell to a man but a tribute to the revolutionary spirit that had shaped the nation. The red shirt, once a symbol of rebellion, had become a national emblem of unity. Garibaldi's legacy lived on in the hearts of Italians: courage, sacrifice, and an undying love for freedom. If Garibaldi was the sword of unification, Giuseppe Mazzini was its soul. His vision of a united Republican Italy had inspired generations, even if reality did not fully match his dream. After 1861, Mazzini found himself at odds with the new monarchy. He had never sought kings or crowns. He believed the people themselves should be sovereign. For this reason, he lived much of his later life in exile, still writing, still advocating for democracy and social justice. His ideas influenced not only Italy, but also movements across Europe. Though marginalized by the monarchy, Mazzini remained revered by students, workers, and young patriots who saw him as a prophet of liberty. His speeches and writings spoke of sacrifice, duty, and the moral responsibility of citizens toward their nation. He reminded Italians that unity was not only about territory, but about justice and equality. In 1872, Mazzini died quietly in Pisa, under an assumed name to avoid persecution. But when the people discovered his passing, tens of thousands attended his funeral. They carried banners and sang hymns, honoring the man who had given his life to the dream of Italy. Mazzini's republic never came to pass, but his ideals remained alive, echoing in the democratic struggles of the future. He was remembered as the conscience of unification, the eternal voice urging Italians to build not just a nation, but a just society. Camillo Benso, Count of Cavour, never lived to see a fully united Italy, but his fingerprints were on every step of the Risorgimento. Known as the brain of unification, Cavour was neither a soldier nor a street agitator. His battlefield was diplomacy. As Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, he modernized the economy, strengthened the military, and created a state capable of leading the unification. Unlike Mazzini, who believed in pure revolution, or Garibaldi, who trusted in the sword, Cavour believed in pragmatic politics. He outmaneuvered Austria, charmed Napoleon III, and used alliances to secure victories that would otherwise have been impossible. Though he died in 1861, only months after Italy was proclaimed, his legacy endured. Italians remembered his words: "Italy will be united by railways, schools, and trade as much as by armies." Cavour had not only fought for unification, but also laid the groundwork for a modern nation. In Turin, his funeral drew thousands. Citizens, soldiers, and intellectuals paid tribute to the man who had used cunning, patience, and strategy to turn a dream into a kingdom. To some, he was cold and calculating. To others, he was the indispensable architect. His legacy was one of realism, a reminder that dreams needed not only passion, but also strategy. Italy was his unfinished masterpiece. Victor Emmanuel II, the King of Piedmont Sardinia, who became the first king of Italy, symbolized the continuity of the Risorgimento. Unlike Mazzini, Garibaldi, or Cavour, he was not a visionary thinker or daring revolutionary, but he played the vital role of giving legitimacy to the new nation. It was under his crown that Italy united. He allowed Cavour to maneuver diplomatically, tolerated Garibaldi's bold adventures, and embodied the new monarchy Italians could rally around. His courage in battle, particularly against Austria, won him respect as the soldier king. In 1878, Victor Emmanuel died in Rome. His funeral was a grand event, the first of its kind for an Italian monarch in the new capital. Citizens lined the streets of Rome, waving the tricolor in solemn respect. He was buried in the Pantheon, a resting place once reserved for emperors and saints, now home to the king, who had united Italy. The title Padre della Patria, Father of the Fatherland, was inscribed beside his name. For generations, Italians saw him as the monarch who gave their struggle a crown. His faults were many. Critics said he lacked vision and education, but his endurance and symbolism made him indispensable. Victor Emmanuel's legacy was that of unity, the king who gave Italy a throne upon which to stand. The unification of Italy did not instantly heal the deep divisions between North and South. By the 1870s, the so-called Southern Question became one of the greatest challenges facing the new kingdom. The South, formerly the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, was impoverished and underdeveloped. Land was concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy families, while peasants worked small plots with little hope of upward mobility. High taxes and bureaucratic corruption fueled resentment against the Piedmontese rulers, who many southern Italians saw as conquerors rather than liberators. Banditry became rampant. Former soldiers of the Bourbon army, opportunistic brigands, and disenfranchised peasants resisted the new government. Military patrols attempted to restore order, but clashes often resulted in violence, making reconciliation difficult. Politicians in Turin debated solutions. Some argued for military suppression, while others called for social and economic reforms, roads, schools, and land redistribution. It became clear that political unity alone could not guarantee loyalty or stability. Culturally, the South maintained strong regional identity. Dialects and customs were distinct, and the people often felt disconnected from the Northern-led administration. Education programs aimed to create a common Italian identity, but progress was slow. Despite these difficulties, the South gradually began integrating with the North. Railways and trade expanded, and some towns flourished under new industries. Yet the Southern Question remained a persistent reminder that unification was an ongoing project, not a single moment in history. With political unification achieved, the next challenge was cultural and social, creating a shared Italian identity. The peninsula had been divided for centuries into kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, each with its own dialect, traditions, and loyalties. Now, a common language, symbols, and values were essential for national cohesion. Schools became crucial. The government mandated Italian language education, teaching children a common tongue for the first time. History lessons emphasized the Risorgimento, the heroes and the struggles that had united Italy. Patriotic songs, poems, and literature celebrated the tricolor and the sacrifices of Garibaldi, Mazzini, Cavour, and Victor Emmanuel II. Mass media also played a role. Newspapers, pamphlets, and journals spread ideas of national pride and citizenship. Citizens from Venice, Naples, and Palermo could now read the same stories and share a collective consciousness. Festivals and public holidays reinforced this unity. November 4th and March 17th commemorated key victories and milestones of unification. Monuments to fallen heroes were erected in towns and cities, reminding Italians of the shared past. Yet the process was gradual. Regionalism remained strong, especially in rural areas. Local dialects persisted, and loyalties to town and province often exceeded loyalty to the kingdom. Nevertheless, the foundations of a national identity were laid during these formative decades. By the late 19th century, Italians increasingly felt a sense of shared destiny. The Risorgimento was no longer just a historical event, it became a symbol of collective aspiration, hope, and resilience. The dream of unity, once fought for with swords and diplomacy, now continued in classrooms, streets, and hearts. By the 1880s, Italy began transforming from a mostly agrarian society into a modern nation. The north, particularly Lombardy and Piedmont, led the way with factories, railways, and emerging industries. Turin, Milan, and Genoa became hubs of commerce and innovation, attracting workers from the countryside. The expansion of railroads connected cities and ports, enabling faster trade and the movement of people. New industries produced textiles, steel, and machinery, creating employment and fueling economic growth. Banking and finance grew, supporting entrepreneurship and investment. However, modernization was uneven. The South remained largely rural, lagging behind in infrastructure and industrial development. This disparity exacerbated the North-South divide, with tensions over migration, wages, and opportunity. Many Southerners migrated to northern cities or abroad, seeking a better life. Education and literacy increased, especially in urban centers, fostering an informed citizenry ready to participate in politics and commerce. Italy began adopting technological innovations like telegraph lines, steamships, and mechanized factories, signaling its entry into the modern world. Culturally, industrialization inspired new ideas. Intellectuals debated the role of science, education, and governance in shaping Italy's future. Artists and writers depicted the tension between tradition and modernity, celebrating progress while mourning the losses of old ways. Italy was no longer just a newly unified state, it was an emerging modern nation striving to compete with industrial powers like France, Germany, and Britain. By the late 19th century, Italy sought recognition as a modern power in Europe. Having unified politically, the nation now aimed to assert itself diplomatically and militarily. Italy joined the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1882, seeking protection and influence. At the same time, Italian leaders pursued colonies in Africa, hoping to emulate other European powers. Eritrea and Somalia became footholds for Italian imperial ambition, though success was limited and often costly. Diplomatically, Italy worked to secure its borders, negotiate trade agreements, and gain respect among nations that had once dismissed it as a fragmented peninsula. Italians looked to assert their national pride while navigating alliances and rivalries that defined European politics. Culturally, Italy projected its influence through art, literature, and scientific achievements. Universities and academies flourished, producing innovations in engineering, medicine, and the arts. Italians increasingly felt part of a global community, contributing ideas, talent, and labor to the broader world. Yet the young nation faced challenges. Economic inequality persisted, southern unrest simmered, and regional loyalties occasionally undermined national cohesion. Despite these struggles, Italy had emerged as a recognized European nation, capable of defending its interests and participating in global affairs. The Risorgimento was no longer just a story of unification, it had become a foundation for Italy's future as a modern state on the international stage. After unification, the Italian government realized that true nationhood required more than political boundaries. It required an educated and engaged citizenry. Schools and universities became a priority. Compulsory primary education was gradually implemented, aiming to teach the Italian language, history, and civic values to children across the peninsula. Teachers were tasked not only with literacy, but with instilling a sense of national identity. Textbooks recounted the struggles of the Risorgimento, celebrating heroes like Mazzini, Garibaldi, Cavour, and Victor Emmanuel II. Stories of battles, sacrifices, and victories were used to foster patriotism. Social reforms also aimed to improve living conditions. Public health initiatives addressed epidemics like cholera, and infrastructure projects, such as roads, bridges, and aqueducts, sought to connect regions. Urbanization in the north brought both opportunities and challenges, including overcrowding and labor unrest. Philanthropists, intellectuals, and social reformers worked alongside the government to promote literacy, hygiene, and welfare. Women, though largely excluded from politics, contributed to schools and hospitals, advocating for social progress. Despite these efforts, the South lagged behind. Regional disparities persisted, and many southern communities resisted change, clinging to local customs and dialects. Yet the seeds of modernization were planted. Italy's leaders recognized that a unified nation required unity in knowledge, culture, and civic responsibility, not just borders. Education and social reforms were the foundation for Italy's future, a way to bridge divisions and ensure that the sacrifices of the Risorgimento were not in vain. By the late 19th century, Italy had moved beyond political unification into a period of consolidation and cultural integration. The tricolor flag, once a symbol of rebellion, now flew proudly over towns, schools, and government buildings. National holidays celebrated the victories of the Risorgimento, connecting citizens to shared history and pride. Literature, music, and art played a key role in forging a common identity. Writers and poets celebrated Italy's landscapes, history, and heroes, while composers created works that evoked national pride. Monuments and statues honored Garibaldi, Mazzini, Cavour, and Victor Emmanuel II, visible reminders of the struggles that shaped the nation. Urbanization and railroads helped create physical and social connectivity. People traveled more easily, exchanging ideas and culture, slowly eroding regional isolation. Newspapers and journals spread news nationwide, fostering a shared consciousness. Political life also matured. Citizens began participating in elections, forming parties, and debating issues affecting the entire nation. Though voting rights were still limited, the foundations of representative government and civic participation were established. Despite persistent challenges, economic inequality, the North-South divide, and tensions with the papacy, Italians increasingly saw themselves as one people. The sacrifices of unification, the leadership of heroes, and the struggle for independence had transformed a fragmented peninsula into a nation with a collective identity. The Risorgimento had not only redrawn maps but reshaped hearts and minds. Italy was no longer just a political entity, it was a shared idea, a living memory, and a promise for future generations. The nation's foundation rested not only on victories and treaties, but on education, culture, and civic pride. After political unification, Italians sought to reclaim and celebrate their cultural heritage. Italy had long been a center of art, literature, and music, but centuries of division had left regional identities dominant. Now, a unified Italy allowed citizens to celebrate a shared history of artistic brilliance. Artists and writers embraced the Risorgimento's themes. Painters depicted historic battles, heroic figures, and scenic landscapes from the Alps to Sicily. Poets and novelists explored themes of national pride, social responsibility, and the struggles that had forged Italy. Music flourished as composers like Verdi and Puccini created operas that resonated with patriotic sentiment. Museums and libraries were established or expanded, preserving manuscripts, artworks, and relics of Italy's past. Public festivals highlighted local traditions while connecting them to the national narrative. Folk music and regional dances were celebrated as part of a broader Italian identity. This cultural revival strengthened national pride. Citizens began to see themselves not just as Venetians, Sicilians, or Tuscans, but as Italians. Symbols such as the tricolor flag, monuments to Risorgimento heroes, and the national anthem helped solidify a sense of belonging. Italy's cultural achievements also drew international recognition. Tourists, scholars, and artists visited the country to study its art, architecture, and literature. Italy was no longer merely a political entity, it was a living center of European culture, bridging past and present, tradition and modernity. With political unification and cultural revival, national pride began to flourish across Italy. The people, once divided into countless duchies and kingdoms, increasingly embraced a shared identity under one nation. Public celebrations marked anniversaries of Risorgimento victories. Monuments to Garibaldi, Mazzini, and Victor Emmanuel II were erected in city squares. Schools taught the history of unification as a common narrative, instilling pride in students from a young age. Military parades showcased the strength of the new Italian army, and the Navy demonstrated Italy's growing influence. Citizens waved the tricolor with enthusiasm, while veterans of the wars of independence were honored in ceremonies and public speeches. The press promoted national unity, reporting on achievements in industry, science, and art. Intellectuals debated policies that would strengthen Italy's economy and society, while also fostering civic responsibility and loyalty. Regional rivalries persisted, but a sense of belonging to something larger began to take hold. Sports and public gatherings further encouraged cohesion. Soccer, cycling, and rowing clubs brought people together from different regions. Folk festivals, music competitions, and patriotic events created shared experiences that bridged old divisions. By the end of the 19th century, Italy's citizens increasingly identified themselves as Italians first, and regional differences second. National pride was no longer just a sentiment among elites. It permeated villages, cities, schools, and workplaces across the peninsula. The dream of unity had grown from political conquest into a living, shared identity. By the late 19th century, Italy was experiencing significant economic growth and industrial expansion, particularly in the northern regions. Cities like Milan, Turin, and Genoa became centers of manufacturing, trade, and innovation, helping the new nation compete on the European stage. Factories produced textiles, steel, and machinery, while workshops crafted furniture, tools, and artistic goods. Industrialists invested in railways and ports, improving transportation and facilitating trade. The expansion of the rail network connected northern factories with southern ports, allowing goods and people to move efficiently across the peninsula. Banking and finance grew in importance, supporting entrepreneurship and modern businesses. New industries created jobs, drawing peasants from rural areas into urban centers. This migration contributed to city growth, with neighborhoods forming around factories and workshops. Despite progress, economic disparities persisted. The North prospered, while the South remained largely agrarian and underdeveloped. Emigration became common, with thousands leaving southern Italy for the Americas and northern Europe, seeking better opportunities. Socially, industrialization fostered new ideas about work, labor rights, and social reform. Trade unions and workers' associations began forming, advocating for better conditions and fair wages. These movements laid the groundwork for Italy's labor politics in the 20th century. Italy's economy was no longer stagnant, it was becoming a modern, interconnected system. The foundations for industrial society, urbanization, and international trade were established, ensuring that Italy's political unification would be matched by economic and technological progress. Italy's industrial growth went hand in hand with technological progress and innovation. The nation adopted modern machinery, steam engines, telegraph lines, and mechanized production methods, accelerating its integration into the industrial age. Railroads expanded rapidly, linking cities, ports, and countryside, transforming trade and communication. Steamships carried goods across the Mediterranean, while Italian engineers developed new techniques for bridges, tunnels, and roads, connecting previously isolated regions. Scientific research flourished. Universities promoted studies in medicine, engineering, and natural sciences. Italian inventors contributed to advancements in agriculture, manufacturing, and communications. Newspapers and journals spread knowledge about new technologies, encouraging entrepreneurship and innovation. Electricity and mechanization began to appear in factories, workshops, and urban centers, improving productivity. New industries such as chemicals, ceramics, and printing emerged, while traditional crafts adapted to modern methods. Technological progress was also a source of national pride. Italians celebrated inventions, engineers, and breakthroughs that placed the country alongside other European powers. These innovations symbolized Italy's transformation from a fragmented peninsula into a modern nation capable of competing economically and culturally. Challenges remained. The South lagged behind in industrialization, and rural communities struggled to adapt. Nevertheless, technological progress created new opportunities, fostered social mobility, and strengthened the foundations of Italy's future development. Italy had not only achieved political unification, it was evolving into a technologically capable modern nation ready to face the challenges of the 20th century. By the turn of the 20th century, Italy's rapid industrialization brought new social challenges. Workers in factories and mines faced long hours, low wages, and poor working conditions. This gave rise to organized labor movements, strikes, and social activism across the country. Trade unions began to form in cities, such as Milan, Turin, and Genoa, advocating for labor rights, safer working conditions, and fair pay. Strikes were often met with resistance from factory owners and the government, leading to clashes between workers and authorities. The socialist movement gained momentum, promoting ideas of equality, social reform, and the redistribution of wealth. Intellectuals, journalists, and political leaders debated the best ways to address the social inequities that persisted despite political unification. In rural areas, peasants faced different struggles. Land reform was slow, and many southern communities continued to suffer from poverty, high taxes, and limited opportunities. Migrants from the south flocked to the north, or emigrated abroad, seeking better lives in the Americas and northern Europe. Women began to participate more actively in social reform movements, working in education, healthcare, and charitable organizations. Although excluded from formal politics, they played a critical role in raising awareness of social issues. These social movements reflected Italy's growing pains as a modern nation. Political unification had succeeded, but true unity required addressing inequality, improving living standards, and fostering a sense of shared citizenship. The struggles of workers, peasants, and reformers would shape Italy's social and political landscape for decades to come. Italy's unification brought not only pride but also political challenges. Establishing a functioning parliamentary system proved complex in a nation with diverse regions, languages, and traditions. The constitutional monarchy of Victor Emmanuel II had laid the groundwork, but political participation remained limited. Voting rights were initially restricted to men who met property or literacy qualifications, leaving the majority of citizens without a voice. Political parties formed, representing various ideologies: monarchists, liberals, socialists, and radicals, often competing intensely for influence. Corruption and patronage plagued local and national politics. Ministers and mayors were sometimes more loyal to local interests than to the national government. Nevertheless, Italy slowly developed a parliamentary tradition, with debates, legislation, and public accountability becoming part of civic life. Key issues included education, labor laws, taxation, and infrastructure. Politicians grappled with balancing the needs of industrial northern cities with those of rural southern regions. The so-called Southern Question remained a recurring topic in debates, reflecting persistent regional disparities. Foreign policy also tested Italy's political institutions. Alliances and colonial ambitions required careful diplomacy and negotiation with stronger European powers. The government had to ensure national cohesion while projecting strength abroad. By the early 20th century, Italy had established the foundations of a parliamentary democracy. Although imperfect, it allowed citizens to engage in political life, express their opinions, and influence national policy. The development of Italy's political system reflected the ongoing process of nation building, moving beyond unification to create a functioning modern state. By the early 20th century, Italy was increasingly aware of its place on the international stage. Having achieved political unification, the country sought recognition and influence among the major European powers: France, Germany, and Britain. Italy joined the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1882, a strategic move intended to secure protection and political leverage. At the same time, Italian leaders pursued colonial ambitions in Africa, hoping to establish a foothold like other European nations. Eritrea and Somalia became key areas of focus, though these colonial ventures faced significant challenges, including resistance from local populations and logistical difficulties. Diplomacy played a vital role. Italian ambassadors negotiated trade agreements, navigated alliances, and sought to protect the nation's interests in a rapidly changing Europe. The government emphasized modernizing the military and navy to project power abroad and safeguard its newly acquired territories. The press and public opinion supported national pride in Italy's growing international role. Citizens celebrated diplomatic successes, military victories, and exploratory missions abroad. Italy's entry into global affairs was a source of prestige and a demonstration of the country's maturity as a unified state. However, foreign policy also exposed internal tensions. Military campaigns were expensive, sometimes unpopular, and often highlighted economic and regional disparities at home. Balancing domestic needs with international ambitions became a constant challenge for Italian leaders. By the early 1900s, Italy was recognized as a European power, with growing influence overseas and a national identity strengthened by both domestic unification and international engagement. Despite unification and growing international recognition, Italy faced serious internal challenges in the early 20th century. Social, economic, and political pressures tested the resilience of the young nation. Industrialization continued in the north, creating wealth but also widening the gap with the rural south. Many southern Italians remained impoverished, fueling migration to northern cities and abroad. This migration caused cultural and social tensions in urban centers while depleting rural communities. Labor unrest persisted. Strikes, protests, and demands for better working conditions reflected growing awareness among industrial workers. Socialist and anarchist movements gained traction, challenging the government to address inequality and protect workers' rights. Political instability was also a concern. Parliamentary factions frequently clashed, and corruption undermined public trust in local and national authorities. Expanding suffrage became a key issue, as reformers argued for broader inclusion in the political process. Natural disasters, including floods and earthquakes, highlighted the vulnerability of Italy's infrastructure and the need for stronger governance. Public health campaigns and modernization efforts were ongoing, but insufficient to fully meet the population's needs. Culturally, Italians continued to foster a sense of national identity, but regionalism and traditional loyalties persisted. Education, festivals, and media played an important role in unifying the population under shared symbols and values, but the process was gradual. Despite these challenges, Italy remained committed to its path of modernization, social reform, and international engagement. The Risorgimento's legacy, the vision of a united, independent, and proud Italy, continued to guide leaders and citizens alike as they faced the complexities of the 20th century. As the 20th century approached, Italians began to reflect on the meaning and legacy of the Risorgimento. The unification of Italy had transformed a fragmented peninsula into a single nation-state, but the struggle for unity had come at great cost. Soldiers, revolutionaries, and ordinary citizens had sacrificed their lives, and the social and economic challenges of the South and North remained. The heroes of unification, Garibaldi, Mazzini, Cavour, and Victor Emmanuel II, were remembered not just as historical figures, but as symbols of courage, vision, and determination. Monuments, plaques, and ceremonies celebrated their contributions, reminding Italians of the ideals that had driven the movement: liberty, equality, and national pride. Educators emphasized the moral and civic lessons of the Risorgimento. Children learned how ordinary citizens could shape history through courage, intelligence, and sacrifice. Citizens debated what unity truly meant, not only political unification but cultural, social, and economic cohesion. Italy had grown stronger politically and economically, yet reflection revealed the work that remained. The North-South divide, economic inequality, and regional differences were still challenges to overcome. The Risorgimento was a foundation, but a living, evolving nation required continuous effort to achieve the vision of its founders. Ultimately, the Risorgimento was celebrated as a triumph of collective will and determination. It had created a nation that could inspire its people, project influence internationally, and nurture a shared identity that transcended centuries of division. By the early 20th century, Italy had achieved a remarkable transformation. From a collection of divided kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, it had become a unified, modern nation. Political boundaries, cultural revival, economic development, and social reforms had laid the foundation for a stable and proud Italy. National pride permeated society. Citizens from Naples to Venice, Palermo to Turin, increasingly identified as Italians first. Monuments to the heroes of unification, the tricolor flag, and commemorative ceremonies reinforced the sense of shared history. Schools, literature, and art celebrated national achievements, while teaching the values of citizenship and civic duty. The economy continued to grow, with northern industry thriving and southern regions gradually modernizing. Railroads, ports, and factories connected cities, facilitating commerce and migration. Technological innovation advanced agriculture, manufacturing, and communications, ensuring Italy could compete with other European powers. Social reforms and labor movements addressed inequality and promoted civic engagement. Although challenges remained, including regional disparities and political tensions, Italy had established the foundations for a functioning parliamentary system, modern infrastructure, and a national identity that transcended regional loyalties. Italy had become more than a geographic entity. It was a living nation, united by language, culture, history, and shared aspirations. The Risorgimento had succeeded in creating a country capable of defending itself, fostering innovation, and instilling pride in its citizens. The sacrifices of the past were honored through progress, culture, and collective memory. As Italy moved into the 20th century, the country faced new opportunities and challenges, but its identity as a united nation, forged through revolution, diplomacy, and perseverance, would guide it into the future. The dream of unification had been realized, leaving a legacy that inspired generations to come.